This is the I'm Giving Notice podcast, session 16.
This is the I'm Giving Notice podcast, where you get to take control of life's big three and have the career, relationships, and health that you've always dreamed of. Now, get ready to say, I'm Giving Notice, with your host, Mace Haroff.
Hi, this is Mace Haroff, and welcome to the I'm Giving Notice podcast, episode 16. The interview you're about to listen to with Gary Greenfield has some really great, actionable steps in it. And I wanted to do this brief intro because a lot of what Gary is going to talk about may be things that you think you've already done or that you're already good at doing. And here's what differentiates Gary from most of the other people out there. Gary takes a very systematized approach to his life, and it's paid off big time for him. He was able to transition out of his corporate career to develop a very successful consulting career. And what made Gary successful was his ability and willingness to do the things that so many people aren't willing to do. For example, Gary talks about the importance of clear communications. Now, that might sound trite or cliche because we've often heard that clear communications are important. But remember, the difference between people who are able to successfully create a business from those who are not is that the people who will do it have really adopted the mindset and the actions of successful people. So listen to Gary's advice. And don't assume, for example, that you're a good speaker or a good communicator. Gary tells you how you can find out and make sure you have the skills. No matter how good we think we are, often we have to rise to the level of skills that will really take you to the level of success that you're after. So enjoy this interview with Gary Greenfield. He's a great guy. He's a successful guy. And he has an awesome book, too, which you want to find out about. Life's Ride or Fall, You Make the Call. The link to the book is in the show notes. I suggest that you read it. Here's session 16 with Gary Greenfield. Well, hello again, everybody. This is Mace Haroff, and welcome to the I'm Giving Notice podcast. My guest today is Gary Greenfield. Gary is a renowned speaker, trainer, business consultant, and coach. He is the founder of Performance Alliance, where he helps people and their organizations to profit through performance. Gary's expertise includes time management, presentation skills, selling skills, and strategic planning. He's a marvelous speaker and facilitator, and he is someone who has been able to say, I'm giving notice one or more times in his life. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mace. It's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to working with you.
Well, I am too. Let's start off. So people can usually tell a lot about someone by their favorite quote. What is your favorite quote?
Well, the reality is my favorite quote is one that I coined, and it is, life is not about retiring. It's about constantly aspiring. Now, I know it's my quote, and it's legitimate because I Googled it, and when you Google it with quotes around it, you get 5 results, and all of them are from various articles or books or whatever that I've written where I've used that comment.
Well, I like the idea of using your own quote even more than choosing someone else's because you've probably lived this quote, which makes it all that much more special. Gary, let's talk about your career. You've held various jobs over the years. What did you do?
Well, I started out as a life insurance sales agent while still in college and evolved to being an executive in charge of large sales and marketing organizations within the financial services industry.
Okay, so now, at some point, you transitioned out of the corporate world to become a consultant in your own business. Tell me about that, what you did, the ideas you have when you were thinking about leaving the corporate world. How did it all happen?
Okay. I laid the groundwork, really, through developing my knowledge and skills during the 3+ decades in my corporate career. I then focused on the knowledge and skills of passion and interest to me and how I could use them as a service to sell in my own business. Finally, as I really got that focus in place, I leveraged a single business relationship I had at the time, and this was back in 1999, mid to end of 99, and I leveraged that single business relationship by presenting to them my ideas on how I could help them. They bought it, and my business has evolved from that single relationship. And as I say, at that time, around 1999, I felt I had the financial situation to take the risk. So I made the leap from the corporate career to one of business consultant, coach, trainer, author, and speaker.
I think it's really neat that you mentioned the relationship, that you were able to leverage a relationship that you had created over the years. When you created this relationship, in the back of your mind, was there something that said, this person could be someone who is good to know down the road? Or was it just the outcome of how you normally create relationships?
Really, I would have to say both things. And it only came as someone nice to know down the road as I began to focus on this transition, from my corporate career to my own business. But initially, it was purely, a circumstance. Actually, the way it all started was I was a client of this firm and worked with them for a number of years, they working with me relative to my needs within the financial services industry. And from there, we evolved into an even stronger relationship from a personal perspective. And then, as I say, it came in focus as I began to think about, well, all right, so what are my passionate knowledge and skills and how would I apply them and how can I use that to help other people? And I thought of this organization first because of the reasons I just expressed.
So again, you reemphasize the importance of relationships, not only during your current career, but how valuable they could be to someone moving forward. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, sorry. But yes, absolutely. Let's face it, it really is all about relationships, regardless of what your focus in life, whether you're in a career position of some sort from a corporate perspective or whatever, or whether you're pursuing your own self-employment efforts. It's all about relationships.
And what's interesting is that people never really know which relationships they have are going to prove to be valuable in their lives until they experience some event or something happens. We tend to take our relationships for granted, but you gave a perfect example of how a relationship really helped launch you out of your career, which is one of the things that the I'm Giving Notice podcast is all about. Okay, Gary, I want to talk about your book. I really enjoyed your book, Life's Ride or Fall, You Make the Call. And in the book, you wrote, wouldn't it be wonderful if life were a certainty rather than a true mystery? In other words, knowing our exact path, and then you go on to make the point that we really wouldn't want to know exactly everything life has in store for us, like the day we're going to die. What holds so many people back who would like to change their careers, maybe have their own business, is uncertainty. How can people get comfortable with uncertainty?
I think the absolute essence of the answer to that, Mace, is knowledge, is the key to overcoming fear and the lack of belief in oneself.
So how do you develop belief in oneself? Because I think that is one of the drawbacks. When people are considering a change in careers, they know they have certain skills, they love to do it, they see other people doing it, but they don't believe that they can do it. How did you develop the belief to know that you could move forward and succeed doing your own thing?
It comes down to, it's a cliche maybe, but it really is true. When you know, you know, you know, you know. And which sounds redundant, but the reality is the only way you can overcome your own sense of your self-limitations, in my opinion, and certainly, I've lived it, is to just build all of the knowledge that you possibly can. Find out what it is that's holding you back, or whether that be fear or whether that be a lack of belief. Find out what the specifics are and then set a specific plan in place to build the knowledge to minimize that weakness, if you will.
There's always going to be uncertainty moving forward. And one thing that makes people comfortable with uncertainty is having a backup plan. Did you have one?
Oh, absolutely. No, there's no question. It's the old cliche again. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So, you can put that in plan A and plan B or C or D. There's no doubt that as you proceed on whatever path, best laid plan or not, you're going to have to adapt to evolving circumstances as things change, as you progress through your plan. So, no question.
Gary, one of the other things that you talk about in the book is creating a list of dreams for your personal and professional life. And you ask the reader to go through the list and ask himself or herself why or he or she would want to achieve each dream. Then you say to select only those dreams that give you a visceral feeling of passion deep in your soul. I mean, that's pretty intense. Why is passion so important in pursuing a dream?
Hey, I see it as all achievements begin with a powerful reason why. And if you don't understand and have a strong feeling why you want something, you won't have the vision and dedicated energy to achieve it. Passion is at the absolute core of understanding why, in my opinion.
Well, along the lines of why, one of the reasons people consider getting into another line of work is money. They want to make more money. Is money a big enough why for success, in your opinion?
Frankly, no. I think that, money is how you keep score to probably be repetitive with somebody else saying the same thing. But the reality is the money is the way you keep score. But you're not going to achieve a very high score, in my opinion, if you do not have a sincere gut level focus on some other passionate reason why, rather than just money. It's got to be something that has to do on a deeper level than the material, in my opinion.
Gary, one of your areas of expertise is strategic planning. How strategic was your planning when you were leaving your job to go out on your own?
Well, I really began the transition seriously 4 years before I actually made the move. That's how strategic it was.
And what things did you consider? I mean, what kind of plans did you make for the move?
Well, for me as a speaker, a trainer, et cetera, the first step I took is, all right, if I'm going to do this, I may have one level of credibility within my corporate career, which I did have a high level of credibility. But stepping out on my own in a business was a whole different potential situation. So in anticipation of that, I said, well, what are some of the things that I need to do to begin to establish some level of credibility? And it was at that point, we're talking now based on the dates I've shared with you concerning my making the move from my corporate career. 1996, I joined the National Speakers Association with the specific intent of beginning to understand the business, the formal business of speaking and its adjuncts in terms of training, coaching, authoring, and all of that sort of thing. And so it was in that process I began in 1996 and began to put piecemeal, based on what I was learning from that association, the detail of vision, plan, overall goals, etc.
Did you do market research for the area that you were heading into?
To be very honest with you, I didn't. And when I say I didn't, that's probably not really true. What I didn't do was formal research at that time. I had learned through my experience in my corporate career what the organizations that I was going to go after needed, to be more specific and helpful in that regard. The initial focus of my business was solely on what I refer to as contract training. In other words, I had in my mind I was going to find people or organizations that provided a service to their clients that involved training, coaching, etc. And my experience over the years in my career path was that there were organizations out there that were doing a great job in creating training materials or, and coaching people, etc. But they had a dearth of skilled presenters, facilitators, etc., to in fact deliver their product to their client. And that's exactly the seed of my business, was to take the skills and the knowledge that I had of presenting and training and coaching and market those skills to organizations that needed to pay somebody to provide their training and coaching, et cetera, to their clients.
One of the common threads I've experienced in interviewing professionals such as yourself has been speaking. And some of my listeners might be thinking, wow, I'm not a speaker. I'm not comfortable in front of a group of people. So this is really two questions. The first question, why is speaking so important for entrepreneurs? And secondly, for people who have no experience or limited experience speaking, what should they do?
Well, I think the whole idea of being able to communicate effectively comes back to the ability to build relationships. And speaking is nothing more than an extension of talking to a person one-on-one. And you've got to be effective in that form of communication, no question, in order to build a strong relationship, build trust and all the things that go into a strong relationship. So it is true when, thinking in terms of the concept of speaking. It's nothing more than the extension of building a relationship on a one-on-one basis. So all of the things that go into building the one-on-one relationship have to go into your communication skills as it relates to, presenting to small and large groups. Inevitably, that's going to be a factor, along any career path.
Would it be fair to say that speaking leverages your ability to build those relationships with multiple people at the same time?
Absolutely. No question about it.
For people who aren't comfortable with their speaking or presentation skills, what can they do to become comfortable?
Well, the first thing I would recommend when just focusing on becoming comfortable as a speaker, as a presenter, is to find the best chapter of Toastmasters they have in their area and get knee-deep in activity with that organization. Because that's what it's all about, in essence, is helping people become more comfortable in that regard. And everybody is in the same boat, and everybody is willing to share and provide feedback and lift each other up.
Great advice. One of the tenets of I'm Giving Notice is that your work affects your health and your relationships. In fact, all three affect each other. How can people stay focused, in your opinion, and everybody is different, but how do you stay focused on your work, maintaining the relationships with your spouse, your wife, Carolyn, your family, and your friends? How do you take care of all three?
The key for me is by creating a documented daily to-do list, and I emphasize documented.
What does that mean? What does documented mean?
Well, in my case, it means two things. In my Outlook, I'll have to-do things in my list on Outlook, and I will also have a working list that I write. It's just a carryover from my past that I have never gotten away from. They don't duplicate each other necessarily, but I use Outlook to defer things, like something that needs to be done 1st of November will pop up on my Outlook. Then I will enter that for that particular day on my written list, just so I'm able to, it's just a thing, a hang-up I have about having a written to-do list.
A lot of people have to-do lists for work, but you also have a to-do list for things in your life such as your health and things such as relationships. Tell me about that.
Again, if you don't take into account the three broad areas you outlined, your health and relationships and your work, and get them in some specific way on a to-do list, you're gonna sacrifice one or the other. You're going to forget it, maybe even, in terms of something that needs to be done that day. So my to-do lists are always focused in those three broad areas that I mentioned, and there are specific tasks within each of those areas. And then I drive myself to focus in on getting the most important of those done in each category each day, which means I might carry something over from one day to the next, but at least I got, from my point of view, the most important things I needed to get done in each of those areas done on the given day.
With those three categories, health, relationships, and work, which one comes first to you?
Well, frankly, relationships, then health, then work.
Interesting. Tell me why relationships come first.
If you haven't got your relationships in sync with the rest of your life, the rest of your life tends to get in trouble. Let's face it. I mean, if your relationships aren't solid, your health can be impacted. If your relationships aren't solid, your work will inevitably impact it. So that's why I focus on relationships. And when I say relationships, I don't mean just personal. I mean business as well.
Fair enough. And as far as your health goes, what do you do personally to stay healthy?
Focus on 150 minutes minimum a week. This is minimum.
Minimum
of what I would call organized exercise. Not thinking in terms of, walking to and from my car, but organized exercise, which includes a substantial amount of walking, a lot of stretching, a lot of weight work, and a lot of balance work as well. And so I focus on a minimum of 150 minutes per week in each of those areas.
Gary, I'm great about exercise when I'm home, but when I'm on the road, it just, all goes to pot. What about you? Are you able to maintain that exercise schedule while you're traveling?
The challenge on the road many times is the walking or some other form of aerobic exercise for me. Sometimes the workout rooms and hotels aren't really great, etc. So I carry actually it's bands with me, the stretch bands.
Yeah.
And I carry those with me because they easily fit in my carry-on luggage. And I can get all of those areas. I can get some aerobic benefit. I can get the stretch. I can get the weight, the weight bearing from those, etc.
What was the best single piece of advice you ever received with respect to your career?
Get as much formal education as you can and continue to build on it throughout your entire life.
It's interesting that you said education, because a lot of people that I speak to today talk about the declining value of education. There certainly is value in terms of it making you a knowledgeable, educated, well-rounded individual. But in terms of career value, again, depending on what career path you choose, for a lot of people now it's becoming questionable. Tell me your thoughts about that.
I think where that may be coming from is when I say formal education, I said that specifically. I didn't say college education. And that's where I think the rub may be coming in, is that there are many people in this world who have invested many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in quote, formal college education, and may not be getting their same return on their money. And in fact, they're not necessarily happy in what they're doing. They were just doing it because they said, the family said, you got to go to college. So when I say formal education, I think we're missing the boat if we're not thinking in terms of our own sense of passion. And for some people, that's a trade type of a school in some form or another. It isn't, a master's degree in philosophy. It's, working with tools in some way to create something in that form. So I think that's where that whole thing is coming from. There's an overemphasis on college degrees.
There is an overemphasis on college degrees, and of course we know that the millennials who have graduated college cannot get jobs. So they own all this money in student loans. They're not getting jobs. So a lot of people are questioning the value of a college degree. But what you're talking about, formal education, this goes directly to your career path. In other words, providing you with the skills to do your job. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's absolutely the case.
So how can someone who has a job right now, they'd like to change their careers? Let's say you have someone who's an engineer. I'm just pulling it out of their hat, but they would like to become a consultant. You know, instead of working for a corporation, they'd like to open their own shop. They'd like to do some freelance consulting, maybe some speaking, training. What type of education do you think would be valuable for them?
I would go back a step to answer that question, Mace. And I would go back and say, don't determine what you want to do by some assumption. Do what I did, and I don't mean this egotistically, but the reality is probably the book that has impacted my life on the greatest level over multiple decades is a book that is still published and updated every year, and it's called What Color Is Your Parachute by Richard N. Bowles. And it's a workbook that will help people define their passion and then how it can be leveraged in their potential career change and, frankly, in their life. And as I say, I've used that on multiple occasions. It's after going through some exercise like that that you begin to define, in my opinion, all right, so what would be the services I would want to provide people, and what would be their pain that they are trying to, overcome that could be solved by the services I would provide.
And again, you came back to passion. There's that common thread in your book and in what we're talking about now. You tell people to find their passion. Oftentimes, though, people tend to think that their passion can't be monetized. Let's say, for example, I like to scuba dive. You know, I was an avid scuba diver for years, and I always used to think of some way that I'd be able to turn this into a money-making career without having to run a dive charter operation or become a dive instructor. I just really couldn't think about it, yet I was passionate about it. So I guess, would it be fair to say you have to have multiple passions? Or you have to look at all your passions?
Well, I think that goes back to one of the earlier questions. You've got to find your passion in terms of your vocational interests, your relationships, and your work. And so, therefore, yes, you got to have multiple passions for ultimately a life well lived, in my opinion.
Gary, you mentioned one book, What Color Is Your Parachute? Were there any other books that had a profound impact on your life? As I consider that, I've read all kinds of books, inspirational books and thought leader books, Who Moved My Cheese back when it was a big deal, and that was a great book. And, The Tipping Point's a great book, and David and Goliath is a current great book, But the reality is that the book that keeps coming back to me that has had a consistent impact, all of those books have had impact, but it's like a passing moment of, I'm going to rethink how I think about that or this or whatever. But with What Color Is Your Parachute? Because of the nature of how that book is structured, it's not a book to read, it's a book to work. And, it is a workbook kind of form. And that's why I think it's something that just always comes to the top of the pile for me. I have to ask you this question because you made a transition a few years before I did. I transitioned around 2004. Back when you transitioned, the internet, of course, was around, but it wasn't the de facto source of information that it is today. The internet and the information that's available versus books, if you were doing it today, which would you lean on more?
I would lean on the internet more. Absolutely, because everything, including many of the great books, certainly many of the inspirational books, you can get online. You can purchase online, or many of them have audio books where you can work yourself through them online. or there's YouTube with any number of great books that have been, reduced to, 6-hour videos. I see them all the time. And so I would definitely go to the internet first. That wouldn't mean that I would totally abandon books at all, because I read books all the time. But to apply what I might read in a book that I find of interest, I'll go to the internet to research, well, how can I use that?
Makes it much more real. Very good advice to take the information from the book and to learn how to apply it.
Yeah.
Gary, I'm going to create a show notes page that will have links to your website and links to your book, Life's Ride or Fall. You make the call, but if you could please tell our listeners how they could find out more about Gary Greenfield and how to get in touch with you.
Well, certainly the lead site to do that would be my website, www.garygreenfield.com. The extension of that, another that would give you a great insight and maybe help for people, would be my primary blog, which again is at www.garygreenfield.com/blog. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Pinterest, etc. So there's all those options as well.
And what is your blog about primarily?
It's focused on one of 4 topics. Each blog is going to either be on the topic of success, the topic of attitude. It could be knowledge or skills, or it could be something that I just categorize the topic of, which is life in general. But it's going to be one of those 4 topics, and it's going to be usually 250 to 500 words.
And those are all areas that we could use help with. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Greenfield. Gary, thank you so much for being a guest today on the I'm Giving Notice podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the invitation, Mace, and the chance to work with you.
And to all my listeners, thanks for being with us on this episode of the podcast. I hope you will stay tuned to future episodes. And until then, remember, you have the power to change your life by saying, I'm giving notice. Until we meet again, this is Mace Haroff. Bye for now.
This has been the I'm Giving Notice podcast with Mace Haroff. For show notes and more information about how you can take control of life's big 3, please visit www.imgivingnotice.com.